leads us very wonderfully into question number 6, which is how do you define a good or a bad relationship with an agency and the client?
Solid communication and collaboration.
Hmm.
Keys to success.
Yeah.
Without collaboration in some of the relationships that we've had over the last 13 years, it was 13 years last Friday, have lasted 10 years or longer.
Yeah.
And that's because we've been overly communicative, we don't overpromise, we don't underdeliver, and we're able to really understand what our clients' needs are. I think that's that's it. Collaboration is the key to successful anything.
Yeah, and I think coming out of the gate, we've talked about goals a lot, but I think it's super important to talk about goals and expectations in terms of how both businesses operate, because as an agency, there's some agencies that you want to be careful, like Darren said before, we have a process where we're going to have a few meetings with a client, with a potential client, before we decide to put together a proposal or not, because we want to make sure we're going to be a fit. And if an agency comes to you and doesn't take the time to get to know you and how you work, and they just throw a proposal out because they want to get the business, you don't know yet if you're going to be a good fit for that person in the long term. And that goes on the flip side too. A lot of clients are so anxious to get started that they just want to bypass and get work done quickly, and then they put themselves in a bad position because they chose the wrong agency and nobody saw it because they were trying to move so fast.
It's such a key point, what you just said.
Yeah.
If you are a marketing manager and you come to us and say you want to start yesterday, that is very scary.
Yeah.
Very, very scary, because
Culture fit.
that means you're already behind the 8 ball,
Yeah.
which puts us behind the 8 ball, which
And we
never
just met.
ends up well.
Yeah.
Right.
Because then you're rushing to get stuff done,
Yeah.
you're trying to do 5 things at once, and you're scattered, you're all over the place.
And I think the only time that could ever potentially work, and this is where a marketing director you have to know yourself and your company, is if you're looking for subcontracting out service work that you just say, hey, here's a task list, and we need someone to just put hours on it.
Yeah.
Maybe that works, because look, people get put behind the 8
Banging
ball.
stuff out,
You know, so when you're in
Yeah.
that position, if you have that, like, you know, you're not totally SOL, but you know, you just need to recognize and have the self-awareness of what you need for the short term and what you need for the long term, and make the right decision for your company.
And that's as much on an agency
Yeah.
as it is on a client.
Mhm.
Because if you're, as an agency owner, if you're dumb enough to actually engage in that,
Yeah.
and to go down that path with somebody who's already behind the 8 ball, you have no one to blame but yourself.
Yeah, and I would give the advice to the marketing directors too, to over communicate everything from your side, no matter how irrelevant it might seem at the time, because for the agency, they can only ask so many questions about what they can see, right? Like
Not being within the 4 walls.
you know, like
Yeah,
you know, you
that's
don't
big.
know what you don't know about a company, and so if you're hiring an agency, you want to make sure you just brain dump as much as possible so they can get as wide a perspective on your business as possible, so
Yeah.
that you don't jump into an engagement where everything looks good and then it turns out 3, 4, 5 weeks later there's 1,000 things you didn't mention because you assumed it was going to work, but the agency had no clue that it even existed.
That is so incredibly true. Being on the execution side of getting things done,
Yeah.
I only know what the client has divulged to me,
Right.
and we have come up with very comprehensive kickoff questions and worksheets
Yes.
that ask a million questions. But if you as a client or a marketing director haphazardly fill out those documents and we don't have information, our hands are tied, right? Like, we don't know what we don't know. It could not be truer words.
And we've done a phenomenal job of trying to get all of that,
Capture it all.
like extrapolate all that information in that kickoff meeting, even leading up to it, but we're never gonna know everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, and it's also important as a director to recognize what happens if we hit that wall. I think that's another good question you can ask an agency is if things start to hit where we're totally out of scope of what we originally talked about, like what do we do then, right? Like it's almost like when you start planning a business and like you plan an exit strategy for a business, but not necessarily relationships or when things get bad. And I think that's important too. Like, think ahead of like, okay, if things start getting out of hand where you enter an engagement where it sounds like there's 40 hours of work and it turns out there's 150, what do we do at that point? Like, you should have that conversation up front so that if that does happen, like there's less head bumping.
Less friction.
Right.
Just in case, what does our breakup plan look like?
Yeah.
just in case.
Or not even the breakup plan, but like, if things start to get hairy, how do we address that?
How do we
How do we
adjust?
Like,
Shift
hey, we're at,
when it
you
gets
know,
in-
like,
How do
hey,
we
we're
shift?
at, we're at 40 hours of the scope that we thought, like, you have a ton more stuff to do,
Yeah.
like, you know, so is there a check-in point, like, just making sure that there's an understanding of what's going on inside the scope of the engagement.
So all of that kind of leads into morals and company culture and culture fit. I know company culture is a huge buzzword on the internet, on LinkedIn, people write a lot about it. It's becoming more of a prominent talking point, but it really is a valuable part of relationships, especially with an agency and a client or a marketing director and their team, if whether they have a team or it's just them.
Yeah, it absolutely plays a huge part. Tying back into being an agency that loves that face to face, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
I mean, every meeting, every client that we have, we sit in a room with them.
Yeah.
Either at their place or at our place or whatever it may be. And I think as a marketing director, it's really important for you to think about that and really match up when you're, do your homework.
Yeah.
Do your homework and match up, do the research to understand what you're looking for, what your culture's about, and then find an agency that's running a parallel path to you, because you don't wanna get into a place where you don't jive. Like,
Right.
it doesn't work.
It's gonna stop everything else in its tracks.
Yeah.
It's gonna stop the work, it's
Yep.
it's gonna hurt the culture on your side with your team, it's gonna definitely hurt the agency side.
Yeah.
So understanding and doing your homework going in, really putting in the time to understand what you're looking for. Now, they have to be able to do the work. And
Right.
you're not just finding
Yeah,
somebody
that's
for the
basic.
fun of finding
Yeah.
somebody.
Right.
Like, that has to be the benchmark.
Yeah.
But, with regards to our agency, we're an acquired taste. We are who we are. We do really good work. We try to engage clients that we feel are important to us. We're picky about our clients. We try to understand what they're about to make sure that, not only can we deliver a good product, but that we're having fun doing it. I
Would
mean,
we
we spend
want-
a lot of time together.
Well, I know back in the day, we used to say like, would we wanna have a beer with these people
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
6 o'clock on a Thursday night, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like, do we wanna actually talk to this person if it's not about
We've had-
KPIs?
We've had client meetings over creative with like beer and peanuts.
Yeah,
Where literally there were peanut shells all over the floor and we were there till like 10 o'clock at night.
yeah.
Um,
We're, like, are you a
Just work.
super buttoned up person? Are you really casual? Do you prefer a formal setting? Does that feel right to you? Do you
Right.
prefer casual? Does formal feel super strange to you? Are you okay hiring an agency on the other side of the country or in another country
Or a
and
different
have
time zone.
or a different time zone and having
Yeah.
video calls?
Yeah.
I've personally dealt with both ways. They're very different. We like people who are in our state and
Yeah.
we can sit at the table with, but you may not need that. You may want to find, your best niche agency, and they may be in Japan, and that may be cool with you.
Yeah.
But you have to know what is going to be cool with you.
We've had clients on both sides. I
Yeah.
recently got an inquiry for a sales lead that was from Iowa. And they were like, we don't care. We just want somebody in the New York marketplace. There's Skype, there's, video conferencing.
Yeah.
We don't care. For us,
We care.
we did care.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we ultimately said no to the client because we didn't think it would be a good fit. But that's for us. That's our preference. That's ensuring that we're also getting the clients that we love to work
And I
with.
think that's another good question that directors could ask an agency, is to ask them, how do you pick which clients to work with, so you can kind of get an idea there. And I think to tie a bunch of these questions together, the reporting, the goal setting, and the values and the scope of work is, if you're, we talked about kind of culture and personality, but when it comes to business values,
Yeah.
if you're looking for a solutions partner and then you start hitting a scope creep situation, well, because we like to be results oriented, is we tie back to what are the objectives, and we're gonna knock off everything off the list that's not gonna directly impact the objectives, right? Like, there's a lot of busy work that can get put into the mix when it comes to marketing stuff. And so if we start running into a wall, the conversation we wanna have is, hey, here's the objective, like, you're trying to generate more leads, well, doing a bunch of brochure work this month is not gonna help generate more leads, so we need to put that aside. So, all those kind of things, like personality, personal culture and values, as well as like your actual business, from a greater landscape.
Yeah, absolutely.